Beyond the Pillion is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we would like to pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Welcome to Beyond the Pillion. My name is Kahiwa Sebire. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the chaotic one.
And my name is Mark Drechsler, he, him pronouns, and I'm the man that's going to teach you that black latex gloves do have a place outside the bedroom. It's true. Today's the day you're going to learn what else they could be used for.
Indeed. Today we are talking about the basics of maintenance that will help to keep your bike running smoothly and safely and save you money in the long run. Mark?
Absolutely. So the aim of today's podcast is really to give you an understanding of some really simple maintenance tasks. And like we've said in previous episodes, the more time you spend getting up close and personal with your bike, the better you're going to know it and the quicker you're going to notice when something isn't quite right. And quick note as well that these were some quick tasks that we brainstormed. There's probably others that we haven't thought of. If we've missed any and you think, oh my God, why didn't they talk about this? Just leave us a note in the comments. We're happy to do a revisit at some later stage.
Absolutely. So we're going to be talking through the 5 maintenance tasks that we, and by we I mean Mark, think that you should master. We'll be going through a little bit about the what they are, the why you want to do them, the tools you'll need, when to call for help, and we'll also be doing some quick, short videos to walk you through the steps.
Mm-hmm.
But for today, first of all, Mark, first off, we're talking about checking and adjusting your tyre pressures. You mentioned this a little bit in our episode around pre-ride checks, just to check that they were still going okay, but specifically looking at the tyre pressures themselves. What do we want to do there?
Yes. So in that pre-ride check, I sort of said to do just a visual check to see if your tyres are obviously flat. So if they're sitting, with your rims almost hitting the ground, you can tell that they're flat. But motorcycle tyres are something which you do want to keep pretty close to whatever the recommended manufacturer's tyre pressures are. And sometimes that's something that you can't tell just by looking at the tyre. So it is really important. It impacts the way your bike handles, particularly if it's a front tyre that is underinflated. Underinflation or overinflation can also make your tyres wear in very unusual ways, and in ways that can pretty quickly, if you're riding around with the wrong tyre pressures, end up putting your tyre out of shape by wearing unusual spots. And when you do that, as soon as you have got a tyre that is starting to wear in odd shapes, then you're pretty much up for a new tyre, which can be anything. If you've got a cheap bike, you might be able to, in Australian dollars, be finding a tyre that might only cost you $100 or $150. If you're riding a bigger bike or a bike that has larger tyres on it, then you can be up for several $100s for a tyre. So it really is worth looking after your tyre pressures just as a regular thing. And the tools you'll need to do this really is a very simple tyre gauge. So if you go down to your local automotive spares, it doesn't necessarily need to be a motorcycle tyre gauge. Motorcycle tyre valves, which is the bit where you check the pressure, they are the same as a car valve in pretty much every case that I've seen. So if you were to head down either to your local motorbike store or just your car parts, car accessories store, and have a look for a simple, small tyre pressure gauge, then that is the thing that you need. You can do this on service station, gas station, whatever you want to call them, tyre pressure gauges. But for 2 reasons there, I would suggest getting your own gauge. Firstly, those at service stations can be beaten around, knocked around. They're not well cared for, and they can often be, potentially giving you some false readings. And secondly, if you've got your own one, then you are going to be checking the same pressure every time. So you'll be able to get, you are reading with the same instrument every single time that you do it. And that is something which will help you just get used to doing it. And it also just makes it easier. If you've got one gauge, you know how to use it. You find one that works well on your bike, and very easy to do the same thing over and over again.
I suppose it also means it's easier to just do it, of a moment when you're getting ready for a ride, or if you notice something, if it's just in the garage or the shed with you and your bike, reduces one more friction point to avoid actually doing it.
Spot on. A big part of motorcycling, the same as every other kind of thing that you do, like flossing your teeth, is trying to reduce or remove the barriers to do it. So if it gets too hard for you to do, odds are you're just not going to do it all that often. So as Kahiwa said, having a gauge nice and close wherever you keep your motorbike, and then just thinking, ideally, every couple of weeks, if you're doing it even once a month, is better than, I suspect, what a lot of people do. And the final thing in that is when to call for help. So if you if you find a tyre is completely dead flat, then if you can pump it up and get it safely to some place that fixes or replaces motorcycle tyres, do that. If you can't, then you're calling a towing professional or a friend with a trailer. The other thing to keep in mind in terms of calling for help is if you notice that your tyre is gradually but regularly deflating. So if your tyre pressure is meant to be 35 psi, and every 2 weeks you come out and it's dropped down to 25, and you put a bit more in and it keeps on dropping, it probably means you've got a slow leak, which can be more irritating than anything else, but it's still something that's worth going along. Get your local bike shop to check it out. See if you've got either a screw or a nail in your tyre, which can make it slowly deflate. Or sometimes the valves can slowly leak as well. So some of those are fixable. You won't know. Call for help. Get your bike down to your bike store and get them to check it out.
But that talks to your point earlier about the advantage of having your own gauge, is that, again, you're measuring with the same tool, so you're probably more likely to be able to notice that leak over time or a change over time. I'm also wondering where's a good place to find the optimum tyre pressure? What should we be working to?
Excellent question. So 3 places that you might be able to find it. First one is having a look in the manual for your motorbike if you've got one. If you don't have one because you bought the bike secondhand and you don't have a manual, do a Google search for the name of your bike and just the word manual on the end of it. Very often you will find PDF versions online, sometimes through the manufacturer themselves. Sometimes people just share them online. So that's place number 1. It should be listed in there. Place number 2 is to have a look on the swing arm of your bike. Now, if you don't know what the swing arm is, it is the bit that connects your rear wheel to usually the midsection of the motorbike. And very often there will be a sticker that is on there that will tell you the tyre pressures for front and rear. And if both of those things fail, pop down to your local bike store, go in there and ask them what they would be running. And that is going to give you, you can go to online forums, but you will get all sorts of crazy wacko conspiracies about why high tyre pressures is a plot by the government to probably sell you more tyres or something.
And also, I think what is important about tyre pressures is that the optimum tyre pressure will change depending on where you are in the world, the temperature, the humidity, your body weight, the type of riding that you're doing. Are you commuting or going really fast? Correct. Or lots of corners or more kind of in a straight line? It's not a one size fits all, and so that's where they'll give those ranges. And talking to someone in like a local motorbike store or similar is probably a good bet, together with your manual, to say, have a look at those different ranges and work out where you want to be aiming for within that.
Spot on.
Because I remember we had different tyre pressures when we took the bikes out to the track because we were going to, in theory, be going a lot faster. You went faster. I didn't go that much faster.
Yeah, track riding. We will do a post at some stage on taking your bike to the track. The other one I'd throw in there is if you are regularly carrying either a pillion or other heavy weights on the rear of your bike, then that absolutely will mean you're probably going to be running different pressures in your rear tyre compared to if it's just you as a single rider riding it by yourself with nothing else on the back.
Awesome. So that is checking and adjusting your tyre pressures. Next, Mark, you talk about cleaning and lubing the chain. We looked at this in our pre-ride check, just about having a look at the chain and checking to make sure it's still in a reasonable condition. What do we want to think about when we're cleaning and lubing?
Firstly, it is, along with tyre pressures, it is one of the ones that you absolutely should be checking between services. It's probably the one that your chain will get dirty and you will need to clean it. It's not necessarily a fun job. It's certainly not a clean job. But things that we'll talk later on, like checking your oil level, often you can go between services and you won't see any difference. Cleaning and lubing your chain is something you should probably be putting into your diary, into your calendar, maybe like once a month. If you do it once a month, you are going to be doing better than the majority of people out there, I suspect. If you are doing it, if you're riding your bike a lot during the winter months, so with lots of road gunge and grime getting up onto your chain, you might need to do it more often. It might even be every fortnight. If you're only riding your bike occasionally and you're only doing it in good weather, then potentially you might get away with only doing it every 2 months, even every 3 months. But it is absolutely something you need to be doing. Why is it that it's so important? Chains and sprockets. Now, I'm assuming that for most people, you are going to have a bike that has is run by a chain rather than run by a belt or a shaft. Giggle. If you have a bike that's either a belt or a shaft drive, then life is a lot simpler for you because you probably won't need to do anything between services. But if you have a look down at the rear wheel of your bike and you can see a chain and a sprocket on the rear of it, which is basically a disc that has teeth on it, similar to what you would have on a push bike chain. You're running a chain and sprocket and you need to keep it adjusted. If you do not, then, not adjusted, you need to keep it cleaned. If you do not keep it clean, then you can reduce the lifetime of your chain and sprocket quite significantly. So I have seen some chain and sprockets that have gone for 30,000 kilometres before they have needed to be replaced. I suspect that I have seen others that might only get about 5,000 kilometres because they have never been cleaned. They are covered in gunk, and when they do that, they wear very, very quickly. And to give you an idea of cost, a chain and sprocket on an average bike, you might be up for $300 Australian dollars to maybe $450 Australian dollars to replace getting it done through a bike store. A bit cheaper if you're doing it yourself, but it is really something that you can save yourself some cash. You will find that your bike will run better because you are reducing friction that is there, or you're keeping everything just nicely lubed and rolling as it should, and that will make your bike ride better. So that's why it's important. I can't stress that one enough. And the tools that you are going to need. Now, this is where the black, I said latex, but probably nitrile, if you and we'll show you that in the video. Do a Google search or pop down to your local car or accessories place and look for black or nitrile gloves, Nitrile. They are a heavy-duty latex-like substance that you usually buy the gloves in packs of 10, 20, 40, 50, depends on how many you want to get. So that's thing number one, and that will stop your hands getting absolutely caked in grease, oil, gunge, everything else. Thing number two is some rags or cardboard or something that you can put underneath your bike while you clean it, because this one is a dirty job. You are going to end up with crud on the floor. So if you're doing it on a shed surface, then something underneath that can catch all of the gunge. If you're doing it outside, for goodness sake, don't try to do this on a lawn. You will kill anything that is underneath the bike if you try and do it on anything that is living. If you're doing it on a gravel driveway, then that can be okay, so long as you can get the bike suspended, which we'll talk about later. But for most people, you're going to be doing it on a shed floor or some pavers, so make sure you've got something to keep the shed floor nice and clean. Otherwise, you will hear about it from whoever you share that shed with, about the mess that you made. You will need some sort of degreaser. Now, this is another great one. I mentioned in an earlier podcast, the way to start a holy war on the internet is to go onto a motorbike forum and ask them about oil. Another one you can start is to go on and ask what best to degrease a chain. The general consensus is, well, you need some sort of solvent that is going to be able to get the grease off your chain. Now, some people, like old school people like me, will use kerosene, which you can get for very, very cheaply from any hardware store for a large bottle of it. Very harsh on your hands, on your skin if you get it on there. Not great for the environment, but it does a fantastic job. Similarly, if you buy a can of degreaser, which is based on sort of petroleum products, cheap-ish, easier to apply because it's in a can. You are creating more waste. You are still putting a whole bunch of nasty stuff out into the environment. But works extremely well. The other option you can do is using a more environmentally friendly degreaser. So if you go and have a look again in your auto section and look for a degreaser that is based, very often they'll be labelled as orange or citrus degreaser. They are much better for the environment. They're probably better on your skin, but they are more expensive. And to be honest, you might need to use a bit more of them to get the same end result. So I would probably say, for ease of use, if you're just getting started, probably a can of degreaser, which is going to be a couple of bucks from your local auto store. You can spray it on. If reducing barriers to doing something is very important, then that's probably going to be the easiest way. What are the other things you need for cleaning your chain? Some sort of brush. Now, I will show you in the video what a specialist brush is for cleaning your chain, for the sake of about $15 odd, or $10 to $20 Australian. You're going to be able to get yourself a purpose-built brush to do this. They are worth the effort, rather than trying to make use of something else that isn't really designed for it. It'll take you twice as long and give you not as good a job. So we'll show you what a chain cleaning brush looks like. And some motorcycle chain lube, which is, again, take a trip down to your local bike store, ask them what they would recommend for your bike to lubricate your chain, and that's something that you'll be putting on after the cleaning process to make sure your chain is protected against the elements and all nicely lubricated. So this one, there's a bit more in this one that is required, but it is also an extremely important one to do, and we'll talk you through how to do that in our video follow-up. And
so also, I've noticed when you do the cleaning and lubing of our chains, or our motorbike chains, you suspend the bike up in order to have the rear wheel be able to rotate freely. Do you want to talk through that and maybe some alternatives?
Yeah, for sure. So the easiest way of cleaning your chain is by suspending the rear of the bike so that you can spin the rear wheel with your hand while you're cleaning the chain with your other hand. And the simplest way of doing this is what you will hear referred to as a paddock stand. So it is something which sits underneath either side of your motorbike on the swing arm that I mentioned earlier. It straightens your bike up so it's sitting perfectly upright, and it lifts the rear wheel maybe 1 centimetre to 3 centimetres off the ground. They are something that you will pay maybe $100 to $200 for, depending on the quality of the paddock stand that you buy. But they make cleaning your chain infinitely easier, because the alternative, if you don't do that, is you are cleaning your chain one section at a time. So because you can't rotate the wear wheel, you are pretty much putting your bike down, you're cleaning the bottom section of the chain that you can actually see, because there's a bunch of your chain that you cannot see. Then you're rolling your bike forward a bit, rolling all of your gear forward a bit, and then cleaning the next section. Roll it forward a bit, clean the next section. It is a painful process. So
talking about removing barriers, that sounds like it's a really useful way.
Yep, it is a hugely, for the investment you'll make of $100 to $200 Australian dollars, it will make your life so much easier and take just that little bit more hate out of probably the crappiest job you're going to have to do in maintaining your bike.
Cool. All right. So our next maintenance task that we want to talk through is about checking and adjusting your chain. So again, in our pre-ride check, we did talk a little bit about checking your chain, and particularly the play and the state of it. Mm-hmm. So what else do we want to think about on our regular maintenance tasks in terms of checking and adjusting our chain?
Yes, another very important one. And the reasons for doing this are the same as the reasons for cleaning and lubing your chain. And it is that the more you keep on top of the adjustment, the longer your chain and sprocket will last, the better your bike will run, and the more you will save money in the long run. We talked about it briefly in the pre-ride checks. About how much free play your chain should have. Now, free play is if you start finding the midpoint between your front and your rear sprocket, and if you go and have a look at your bike and you think, hang on, my bike hasn't got a front sprocket, that is because it's very often almost always tucked in behind a little cover. You don't necessarily need to see it. You don't need to remove that cover. You just need to have a bit of a guess about, I think that's where the front would be. Mm-hmm. Get the midpoint between the front and the rear sprocket, and if you've got your black gloves on, then you can do it with your finger and you won't get dirty. Otherwise, grab screwdriver, spanner, stick, whatever else. And while the bike is on the ground, so not while you've got it suspended on your paddock stand, but while it's sitting in its natural position, just leaning over on the side stand, just move that midpoint up and down. And either, depending on how finicky you want to be, you can just eyeball it to get a rough idea. If you really want to be finicky, then grab a tape measure and measure the amount that it's moving from the topmost point down to the bottommost point. Now, this is another one where the amount that should be, it'll be defined in your user manual for your bike. You can go and ask your local bike shop about what it should be, but as a really general rule of thumb, it should be 2 to 3 centimeters of movement up and down. Now, if you have it too loose, then you are probably going to be wearing out components a bit more because the chain is sort of just having too much movement. If you have it too tight, and this is a really, really important one, so the reason you have that little bit of play in your chain is because as your swing arm moves up and down, it can actually increase the tension on your chain. So when you have your body and maybe a pillion on, then that chain will tighten up very often because of the way the geometry of your bike your bike moves. So you want a little bit of play so that when it tightens up or when you have a full load on the bike, then your chain is not bearing any of the pressure.
Mm.
Now, if you have your chain done up as tight as a guitar string when it is just sitting with no weight on it, then when you do put weight on it, then you are actually, well, you're doing one of two things. You're either going to stretch your chain really quickly, in which case new chain, and when you replace a new chain, often you will need to replace your sprockets. So that's the best case. The worst case scenario is that you are putting pressure on the little, what's called an output shaft, which is coming out the side of your motor, and which is the thing that provides the drive to that chain, which then goes to the back wheel. Now, if you spend too much time putting pressure on that output shaft, then you can wear either the shaft itself or you can wear where it goes into the motor. Now, if you do that, you can do some seriously expensive damage to your motor because you are wearing something which is a very integral and extremely difficult part of the motor to get out. So by all means, if anybody tells you to tighten your chain up as tight as you can get it, do not listen. They absolutely need to be a little bit loose. 2 to 3 centimetres movement is usually about right. But check your manual, check with your local bike store. That's about as much as I need to say on checking and adjusting it. We'll go through the steps of adjusting.
What tools do you need to
check
and adjust your chain?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so you will need some spanners and some sockets and a socket set, and you might need a longer lever, which is called a breaker bar. Which sounds pretty sketchy. It's nowhere near as exciting as it sounds. This one about checking and adjusting your chain is probably the one that you may need the most specialist tools for. So it could be one that when you're adjusting it, you take it along. If it looks like it's getting out of adjustment, pop along to your local bike store, ask them really nicely if they could just quickly adjust your chain for you. They might charge you a minimal fee, or they might also say, yeah, wheel it around the back, we'll have a quick, we can check it. For somebody with the right tools, it is less than a 5-minute job. But if you don't have the right tools that we'll go through in the video, then you can't do it, and you can actually cause a bit of damage by trying to use the wrong tools to loosen off some very, very tightly wound up parts. You can either damage your tools, you can damage your bike, or you can damage yourself if you strain too hard trying to do something with the wrong tool. So a few different bits that you need there, mostly just specialist tools.
This sounds like one where the most important thing is to be checking on a regular basis and getting really familiar with the amount of play of the chain on your bike, and possibly one where totally possible to ask for help to do the actual adjustment. But it sounds like it's also fairly straightforward, with some investment in the specific tools to be able to do it and to do it properly. Spot
on. And one thing I didn't mention with this is when it's time to call for help. So, and this is just in general around your chain and sprocket. Probably the easiest telltale sign when it's time to go and have a chat with your local bike store, if you see that the teeth on your sprocket are starting to look like shark's fins. And what I mean by that is that they are no longer symmetrical in terms of the teeth on the sprocket. They're starting to look like one side of the sprocket is wearing and the other side is maybe even pitting in or getting grooves into that. As soon as you see that happening, then it's worth popping down and asking your local bike store about whether it's time for a new chain and sprocket. The other one is if your chain is looking excessively rusty or excessively stiff. So if you are you're trying to do your test to move your chain up and down to get an idea of the play, and the whole thing feels as stiff as a board, it's probably time to pop down, get them to have a look. They may say that it's salvageable with enough lubricant to get it moving again, but they might also say, look, no, the chain's just come to the end of its life and it's time to do chain and sprocket time. So, if you see any of those things, pop down, get them to have a quick look. Again, most bike stores will be happy just to pop out to your bike, have a quick look and let you know whether you are in need of something or if you are jumping at shadows, which happens to all of us sometimes.
But I remember you talking about the shark fin teeth on the sprocket and a dry, rusty chain in our episode where we talked about what to look for when you're buying a secondhand bike. So that also makes sense in terms of these regular maintenance tasks also then become things where if you're planning on selling your bike into the future, this will help, again, keeping the value of your bike up. So,
great point.
That was checking and adjusting your chain. Task number 4, checking and adjusting your oil level.
Now, this is one that it's rare that you will need to do much if you have a relatively modern bike. Most modern bikes shouldn't be using much oil between their services, but if they are using oil, then firstly, it's a big danger sign, and secondly, it's something that it's pretty easy to fix up. So, your oil in a motorbike, similar to a car, is an incredibly important part of the way the whole machine works. If you don't change your oil at the prescribed service intervals, which will all be in your manual, or your motorbike gets too low on oil and bits inside the engine start to not be lubricated, you can be up for a very, very expensive repair bill. So, quick and easy one to do. The tools that you need, if you're just checking it, then you don't need any tools.
Well, you need to know where to spot the oil level, though. Yeah,
you do. You do need to know. So, just about every motorbike will have either a little glass window typically somewhere down low on the bike on one of the side covers of the engine. We'll show you this in the podcast, but that is in the video that we'll do as a follow-up, but that's where you can check your oil. There'll probably be something in the manual about how to do it. If you don't have a window, some motorbikes will have a little dipstick that there is a process there for checking whether there is oil on that and getting an idea of whether you've got the right amount of oil in there. When to sort of raise a red flag and when to go and get something checked out. If you ever see the oil light, so just about every motorbike will have either an oil light or some other oil warning indicator on the dash. If that comes on and stays on once you've started the bike, very often it will show the oil warning light before the bike starts up. That's typically normal. When your bike is running, if that oil light remains on, then get yourself to a bike store as quickly as you can. If that may mean that oil is not circulating, it may mean that you are running low on oil. It's probably, even if that ever happens, then it's possibly even a better idea just to call your local bike store and see if it's okay to ride it. If you ever see a puddle of oil underneath your bike or even drops of oil underneath your bike, then that's, if it's a big puddle, call your local bike store straight away. If it's just a few drops, then take it down, get them to have a look at it and make sure that sometimes it can just be a very minor leak, which is not a big deal. Other times it can be something that can be more sinister. You won't know until you get someone to look at it. And the final one, if you do your oil check and you see that, if the oil looks particularly dark through that window, so if it looks more like just black stuff rather than something that is at least a little bit translucent, again, it might be time for an oil change. We won't go into changing oil. We will go into topping up oil.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do the video, you can, if you are running a little bit low on oil, then you can top it up, and we'll do that in the video. Most bikes, though, you will find you won't need to do much in the way of oil top-ups between services. Services on a modern motorbike are going to be between, anything between every maybe 4,000 or 5,000 kilometres and every 10,000 kilometres. So, most bikes these days, you won't need to do it, but it is a really important one. Very quick check when we do the video of it, to save you a huge bill if you get it wrong.
Absolutely. It sounds like that's also a really important reason to keep up with your servicing schedule, as kind of outlined in your bike's manual. And just checking it regularly to keep an eye on what's happening before something goes really wrong.
Yeah, spot on.
Awesome. So that's checking and adjusting your oil level. The final maintenance task we want to talk about today is checking and topping up your brake fluid.
Brakes are pretty important on a motorbike.
It's
same
good
as in
to
a
be
car,
able
but
to
even
stop
more.
when you need to.
Yeah, just to throw that one out there. They are seriously important, and I see occasionally some things come into the workshop that are a bit terrifying when I think, wow, you've been riding around like this. So a really quick check that you can do is to just have a look at the brake fluid in your bike. Now, a note here, this is assuming that you have hydraulic brakes on your bike. If it's a bike that's made in relatively, in the last 20 years, then odds are you will have hydraulic brakes, front and rear. Every now and again, you might have brakes which are not, like on a very, I'm trying to think, I hate to bring it into the conversation again, but I think possibly the CB125E might have had non-hydraulic on the rear, possibly, or something like that.
I have no idea.
I can't remember now. But if you hear me talking about this stuff and you go out and look at your bike and you can't find anything like I'm talking about, then it may be that you are riding a really old braking system that uses cables rather than hydraulic fluid to transmit the signal from your lever, whether that's at your hand or your foot, back to the braking mechanism at your wheel. So don't freak out if you can't find it. Check your manual about how to check your brakes. And if all else fails, pop down to your local bike store. So why is it important? Well, it's pretty obvious. Look after your brakes. They're not something that you want to take risks with. As Kahiwa said, this is another reason to do your regular servicing, because this kind of stuff will be checked every time you get your bike serviced. And it is a really easy task for you to check on the bike. We'll go through on the video the steps to do it, but worth commenting here that brake fluid, which is the stuff which is used to transmit the signal from the lever or pedal to the braking system, it is a really critical component. It's almost as important as your engine oil. And even if you're not riding your bike, then it does have a use by date. So even if you think my brakes are great, I don't need to get my bike serviced, or I changed the oil and I never need to worry about anything else. Brake fluid as a thing lasts for maybe 3 years before it starts to go off. So it's similar to keeping milk in the fridge. Even if you're not drinking it, eventually it does go off and it stops doing the job that you want to do it. As you'll see when we do the video of this, it's a pretty easy task, and you don't need any specific tools typically. Usually a Phillips head screwdriver is something you may need to take the cap off that covers your brake fluid. And other than that, just needing some extra brake fluid if you're just topping up your brake fluid, which sometimes is required. And if you need to get some of that, you know what I'm going to say, pop down to your local bike store, ask them what brake fluid you need to use for your specific motorbike. There's only a couple of different types that you can need, but pop down to them and they will be able to help you out with that. The thing when to call for help on this one, if you ever feel that your brakes are becoming particularly spongy, so there's not a nice firm feel in either the lever or the pedal and a nice firm resistance, but you're starting to feel it get really spongy, get down to your bike store. If you ever jump on your bike and either push the pedal or pull the lever in and it goes straight to the floor or straight to the handlebar, do not ride your bike. Your bike is not safe to be ridden with one brake. Get it towed. There is 0 point in taking risks with your brakes in trying to get it to a bike store. So, and the final one, and you'll see a bit more of this when we start looking at the video. If you ever look into your brake fluid inspection windows and the brake fluid is starting to look a milky color rather than a nice clear, I kind of call it like a urine sample. Good brake fluid should look like a good urine sample. It's the truth. I'm just calling it like I said. If it looks like a cloudy, like a very cloudy type of fluid in there, then again, just the same as if that was your urine sample, you'd want to get yourself to a doctor pretty quickly because something serious is going wrong. With your brake fluid, it just means that your brake fluid is going off and it is in need of flushing out completely and putting a whole new quantity of brake fluid right throughout the brakes. Cloudy urine sample, don't ask me. I'd go and see your doctor. Beyond the Pillion does not provide medical advice.
Thought of any other analogy?
No.
Anyway, so for this one in particular,
okay,
I think
it should look
the
like
video
apple juice rather than cloudy apple juice. There we go.
Apple cider vinegar without the mother rather than with the mother in it. I think this one in particular, the video will be quite important to show you where the brake fluid housing unit might sit on your bike and kind of what to look like. That's it, reservoir. Might look like.
If you want to impress the people in the local bike store, go on and talk about your reservoir.
Yes, so I think the video will be quite useful to see where that is likely to sit on your bike, what to look for in terms of the colouring and tone of the fluid. And we'll be having those ready in the kind of week or so after this episode comes out. Is there anything else you wanted to add about those 5 tasks, Mark?
No, I don't think so. We've tried to keep it just as the really simple ones. One thing I would say, and Kay was kind of hinted at this, is that it's rare that any of these things will go out of whack all at once really quickly. So this is the importance of doing these checks regularly, means that you'll be able to spot these changes when they are in their early stages. Rather than, you haven't cleaned your chain for 12 months and, by that stage, it's well past any kind of fixing and just go to your local bike store and cough up $400 because there's nothing much you can do then. So
I think assuming you're not riding like an absolute hooligan or in completely atypical areas or styles of riding, most of these I think should be things that happen over time. Partly they're a part of normal wear and tear of the different components of a motorbike, and so together with the regular pre-ride checks, these regular maintenance tasks will be things that you should be able to notice over time, and the sooner you notice it, then the sooner you can rectify it and avoid something in the long term.
Bingo.
All right. So our takeaways for today is exactly that first one there. So these tasks shouldn't take too long to actually do. We've taken a little while to talk through them, but when you're actually doing them, they don't take very long. We're talking for the most part once a month-ish to at least be checking and tire pressures and cleaning and lubing the chain. So you're investing a relatively small amount of time in the short term that will hopefully save you time and money in the long term, avoid serious issues, and will also just help you have more enjoyable rides. In the meantime, if you know that your bike is operating as close to optimum as possible, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would say set aside in your calendar 1 hour a month to go through these things, and that should be plenty.
And our second takeaway here is that hopefully, together with the step-by-step videos, these sound like they're really achievable. And we put this out as an invitation to give these a go. And that invitation also extends to me, that these are actually pretty easy things to do. They will help you learn and grow as a motorcyclist. I think particularly for women or people who maybe don't have experience looking after vehicles or engines. Hopefully, this will also help you build your confidence looking after your motorbike. And as Mark said up the top, the more time you spend getting up close and personal with your bike, the better you're going to know it, the more confident you're going to be that it's in a good condition, and the more relevant conversations you'll be able to have when you do take your bike into a local bike store for maintenance or repairs or other issues. You'll have a clearer idea about actually what you're wanting to ask for or what needs to get done.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kahiwa. Now, in our next episode, we are going to talk, probably Kahiwa, I think will spend more time talking about this, and we might even have a special guest or two, possibly, we shall see, about how to connect with others in the motorcycle community, particularly as you are just getting started as a rider. There's a huge amount out there that you can connect into, and we'll try and help you work out how to do it and which ones are going to be fantastic and maybe which ones might be something for later.
I think there's a lot of different options for community, and one of the great things about riding a motorbike and being a part of the motorcyclist community is that there are a bunch of different subcultures too and sub-communities that you can join, and a number of different ways that you can connect depending on how you want to engage with other people. So looking forward to that one to come soon. But until then, please ride safe and have fun. Beyond the Pillion is brought to you by Kahiwa Sebire and Mark Drechsler, and with the support of Women Moto, the online magazine for women motorcyclists. Go to womenmoto.com. If you liked today's episode, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe, and tell a friend. It helps others find the podcast.